Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. This is really great that you came out to see the Hollywood panel here. And I'd like to introduce them. First, we have our moderator. This is Fred Stoller. And I'm going to read off of his website here. Fred is the author of Maybe We'll Have You Back, The Life of a Perennial TV Guest, and has been traveling to colleges, theater groups, and other venues telling stories from his book about his life and the acting world. As a stand-up comedian, Fred was known for his dating woes and his thrill-seeker persona. As in, I drank...
She's got to the joke.
I drank milk that expired yesterday.
You did it better than I used to do it.
He appeared on Late Night with David Letterman, The Tonight Show, and HBO's 13th annual Young Comedian Special. Fred then guest starred on countless sitcoms, establishing himself as TV's go-to nebbish, most notably as Ray Romano's mopey cousin Gerard on Everybody Loves Raymond, Elaine's forgetful date on Seinfeld, that's my favorite, and Monica's bossy co-worker on Friends. He's appeared in the films Dumb and Dumber, Rebound, and Little Man, among others. Fred and Vinny, the indie feature he wrote and starred in, won the Audience Award at the Austin Film Festival. Fred wrote for the animated series Handy Manny, where he also voiced the character Rusty the Wrench. He was a staff writer for Seinfeld. And in doing my due diligence, I roamed around the web and I found out that he had a slew of unsatisfying part-time jobs in his past, which includes a stint as the Wolfman in Coney Island's Tunnel of Laughs ride. He worked at Toys R Us and he sold knishes on the beach at Coney Island. Fred Stoller.
Why don't you introduce everyone? You're so good at it, better than me.
Thank you. So, to our immediate left here is Paul Zolo, a good friend of mine. He's always here. He's returned, what is this, your third time? Paul is a singer, songwriter, musician, music journalist, photographer, and author. He does everything. He's written about music and Hollywood history. His book about Hollywood is Hollywood Remembered, an oral history of its golden age, and there it is. His latest book is entitled More Songwriters on Songwriting, so you can imagine he wrote songwriters on songwriting, too. He's currently collaborating with a friend of ours, famed rock and roll photographer Henry Diltz, on his biography. Paul regularly performs his music and also contributes in special programming at the Grammy Museum. Then we have Carrie Bible. Carrie earned a film degree from what is now the Santa Fe University of Art and Design. Then she headed west in 2000. She has been the official tour guide at Hollywood Forever Cemetery since 2002. She's co-authored the book Location Filming in Los Angeles and Hollywood Celebrates the Holidays with Mary Mallory right there. Carrie also has lectured at El Segundo's own Old Town Music Hall, and she told me she got married there. Mary Mallory, while earning her undergraduate and master's degrees from the University of Texas at Austin, Mary processed film collections at the Harry Ransom Center, conducted research for several important film biographies, and assisted in selecting photographs for the documentary Making of a Legend, Gone with the Wind. After moving to LA, Mary worked in film studios and photo archives while conducting freelance writing and research. She is the author of Hollywood at Play, Hollywood Land, and Hollywood Celebrates the Holidays with Carrie. And then we have Manny. Manny Pacheco returns to our author fair after he was a moderator for a Simula panel about several years ago. He is the author of Forgotten Hollywood, Forgotten History, and also Son of Forgotten Hollywood. Forgotten Hollywood, Forgotten History is not only a book, but can be found online, on cable, and on radio. He has worked in local Southern California television and radio for over 3 decades, and he looks so young. He is a voiceover commercial actor and is a member of the Screen Actors Guild. Our panel, please. Thank you. And now I'll hand it over to Fred, and let's enjoy.
I was hoping to do a Facebook Live to publicize this more, but I don't know how. But I'm winging this, and you could maybe give me notes as I go, because you've done panel before. And at first I was going, have people made this mistake before? What is the boxer Manny Pacheco written?
Well, it's Ferdy Pacheco. I'm actually Manny Pacheco.
Wasn't there a Manny?
Then there's also Manny Pacquiao.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought it was going to be here.
Anytime you Google Manny, Pacquiao comes up before. I'm kind of cursed that way, but yeah.
Okay, so you look friendlier.
Yeah, a lot friendlier.
Okay, all right. I mean, I'll just start with a few minutes about my book and me and how it relates, and we'll talk about our books, and I'll ask you questions, and that way we'll talk about Hollywood, which I love everything about Hollywood. I'm bummed out I don't have Turner Classic anymore. I got rid of cable, so I love Hollywood history, and maybe we'll all be part of it. Oh, thank you. I wrote this book about being a perennial TV guest star actor. I've never been a regular on a show. And I don't know if anyone's seen me in anything. Like she said to Nebish, I'm always the pathetic guy, the annoying cousin, the hypochondriac, because I'm a real good actor. That's acting. I'm really, the guy from The Leftovers. It's just a joke, because he's a ripped guy. And no, so, I always, just to give you a sports analogy, I was always fascinated with like basketball players. I always love following the journeymen, the ones that aren't the stars and we bought this guy already. And he goes, wait, I don't like anything about this. No, I'm just kidding. We're all free and everything. No, I love the interesting stories. We all know about Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. I like the guys that go to Europe or that get the 10-day contracts, the ones hoping to be in the major leagues. And that's what I feel like I've been like as an actor. I'm like a foster child going from show to show, hoping one keeps me on. And that's why it's called Maybe We'll Have You Back. Because you're there for a week and you hope they say that. And they do say it, and it doesn't always mean you'll be back. It's great to be on these shows, but it's frustrating. You're on Raymond and they're talking about what they're going to wear to the Emmys, their new houses. And they get the script for the next week, and you go, oh, wow, please keep me on. This is good. So I thought, and I did, I'd write a book about the different shows I've been on and just the adventures of, like I said, not the star, but what the stars were like to the guest guys like me, who serves you food, which show you get a room with a bathroom, and because I would find this interesting, and I'm hoping people do. And so the book thing is new to me. What happened was years ago, the way you try to get a book agent is you print it up. This is before PDFs, so it's these, and it has to be really spaced so the editors can write notes. So I'd spend money going to Kinko's and printing it up, sending it to New York literary agent, and they said things like, this is funny and quirky, but it's not gritty enough. We want a happy ending. One said we wish there was more sex. I said, me too. I wish there was more sex in my life story. And then I don't want to brag, but I had now it's coming back in the news, a one-night stand with Kathy Griffin, and I put that in the book. They said, all right, there's sex. We can get this published now. But no, it just sat in my computer, and then when I got discouraged because it wasn't as gritty, rehab stuff. So then with PDFs, I sent it around, and people go, this is good, you should read this, send this around. And a thing called Kindle Singles. I wrote on Seinfeld as a writer for a year, and I did a little Kindle single called My Seinfeld Year, and that led to a book agent, and this is exciting. So just these, I don't know, maybe I could ask you questions. I did one in West Hollywood that was fun a few years. Were you at the West Hollywood one?
No, I've heard of it.
You what?
I've heard of it, but not.
Yes. So I don't even know how this happens. I guess it's a small. You sought me out, and she left already. But I'm bad at hustling. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, I love Hollywood. I love all Hollywood stories, the stars, the extras, the history. Because this is what I think. I'm late in life. I started stand-up comedy and I quit college, so I regret not learning about history. I love history, but what I found with Turner Classic Movies, tell me if this is correct, I watch all the documentaries about Hollywood. You learn about history from Hollywood, meaning the film noirs, the Depression, you had all the happy movies because people didn't want to be reminded of the Depression. Then after World War II, you had the noirs because it was a dark time. And then you learn about the blacklisting, and you know what I'm saying? Just by learning about the history of Hollywood, it forms the history of the United States. I find it fascinating. So I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to just introduce a little bit about you and your book, and we'll talk about Hollywood.
Okay, I'll use this one. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just hold it for now. I don't know how to stick it in there now, actually. But my name's Paul Zola, and I wrote this one, Hollywood Remembered. And I'm glad Fred said I love Hollywood and everything about it. I grew up in Chicago, and Hollywood was a magical word to us. And it was mysterious. We didn't know what it really was. We knew Lucy was there, and Dick Van Dyke, and other people, to us, almost as important as Dick Van Dyke. It didn't get much more exciting to me. But when I came to Hollywood in the 80s, I was frankly just mystified. Like, what happened to this place? Why was something so beautiful and so important allowed to go downhill? Especially in 1980, it was not in good shape. So I became obsessed with Hollywood history, just wanting to know how it started and where it came from. And I've been mostly writing books about music. I wrote Songwriters on Songwriting, and the sequel, which is used as textbooks now about songwriting. But I just love Hollywood history so much that I really researched it. And I agree with Raymond Chandler and with Fred, who said Hollywood is great. Anyone who doesn't agree is either crazy or sober. So I tend to believe that. But the main discussion you should keep in mind, there's Hollywood, the metaphor, and there's Hollywood, the place. And some of us are talking about the movie business, the entertainment industry. My book's about the place out of which the movies came, but a lot of other things came. There are religious societies here, and their books talk about that too. So when you talk about Hollywood, it's a big subject, whether you're talking about the real thing or the metaphorical idea. So it's an interesting thing to discuss and one of my favorite subjects. Pass it on.
Oh, you just...
No, she's got her own mic.
All right.
I think I'll share with you.
So tell us your name and your book and how it came about. And
My name is Carrie Bible. I co-wrote Hollywood Celebrates the Holidays with Mary Mallory. The book came about, Mary and I both eat, sleep, drink, and breathe film history. I happen to have been born on Halloween night, and I love Halloween, so I started kind of collecting some Halloween publicity stills. Back in the day, they needed to fill newspapers and magazines, multiple editions, anything to put the stars in front of the public. So the holidays kind of provided an opportunity. Let's put Betty Davis in front of a Christmas tree with a jack-o'-lantern, that kind of thing. So I was collecting Halloween ones mostly. Mary was collecting a lot of various holidays. And one night we were talking about our collections, and we said, oh, there's got to be a book about this, surely. And then we get on the internet and we find out there had actually not been a book about this. And we looked at each other and we said, well, then we have to do it. So that's kind of how this book started and how this book came about. And what you were talking about with how Hollywood kind of reflects American history, nothing's done in a vacuum. So art is always an answer to what's going on in the world. And even in this case, you know, during World War II, they would do a lot of cheesecake and pinup photos for the holidays to remind the boys what they're fighting for. And Ann Miller's going to send you that Valentine. And Sid Charisse is decorating a Christmas tree with war bonds and that kind of a thing. And so definitely, even in something like this that would seem so, you know, innocuous, it definitely reflects kind of what's going on in the world and in America.
The Hollywood Canteen movie was a great movie.
Oh, definitely.
With it had the Hollywood Canteen was in Hollywood, and it was for returning vets. Do you know anything about that?
Well, it was for soldiers that stopped, were maybe even stopping through Hollywood on their way to go somewhere else, and they wanted to see stars. And so Betty Davis and John Garfield, correct me if I got that wrong, they basically ran it, and they got all the production designers, they've got all the artisans and craftsmen talent they could round up in Hollywood to really make this place beautiful and to give it a sense of glamour and a sense that the soldiers who were fighting for us could come there get a sandwich, maybe dance with Rita Hayworth, and kind of really have a good time.
And who were some of the stars that would go there?
Oh, God, just about every star you can think of pretty much participated in that war effort. They would make movies all day, and then at night they'd go down to the canteen, and they'd either serve sandwiches, make coffee, dance with people, or Spencer Tracy would just get up on stage and talk to the guys. And I know even my dad was in Vietnam, and he tells me that Raquel Welch flew out to where he was in Vietnam and gave a show, and my dad said, I'll never forget that.
I grew up during the 60s, and we would watch those Bob Hope specials every year where he would perform for the troops. Yeah, so Raquel Welch. But the Hollywood Canteen didn't continue during Vietnam. It was just
No, it didn't. I was just using that as an example of kind of what getting to see the stars and getting some dose of Hollywood glamour can kind of do to maybe boost morale and kind of take you out of the situation that you're in. And our book is a collection of photos it covers New Year's, Valentine's, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, television stars, and we have a chapter called Hollywood Goes to War, mostly about World War II propaganda type photos.
So it's mostly the holidays.
It's the holidays, yeah.
I remember as a kid watching a sweet movie with Jack Benny about New Year's Eve. Does anyone remember this? Where there was a coffee thing in something had a strike at midnight. Yes. So I just it's holiday movies keep going on. So it sounds like a great book.
Well, it's not about the movies themselves, really. It's about the stars and the artistry of these photos.
Oh.
Because you'll see in the book, which shameless plug, check out our book.
Sure.
But that they really, especially early on, they were very, very artistic photos. They were beautifully lit, incredibly well production designed. And of course, as the studio system would start to dwindle, these photos would become increasingly sparse, where it's like, all right, stand by the tree. Okay, next. I mean, they just were not nearly as nice or lavish, but they had terrific costuming, gorgeous, sets, and they were done by world-class photographers who worked for the Hollywood studios as portrait photographers. So they're very artistic, they're very beautiful, and they're very, very fun to look at.
Now, let me ask you, was there a process in getting, were they public domain permissions and for your book?
Mary can chime in too.
The public domain, it ends up, the studios never sent anything to the Library of Congress Copyright Office. They they send it out to any newspaper. You can find listings in the paper, like Variety. 10,000 stills were sent out across the country for this film. So they were never under copyright. So the classic golden age, and the appeals court has just ruled that. They came out and said that they're in the public domain. So you do not need to get anyone's permission from the golden age up to about 1970.
That having been said, our publisher wanted to put Marilyn Monroe and the Three Stooges on the cover, which those people sell books, there's no question. But we were told by another historian that helps us that if the photos are inside the book, it's editorial. If they're on the cover, it becomes product. And it's sad to say, but Marilyn and the Stooges probably rake in more money dead than they did alive.
Yes.
And they have law firms that are very powerful that represent them. And I like food and shelter. Mary's kind of into that too. So we decided that maybe that wasn't the best idea, so we did not use those for the cover specifically for that reason.
Yes, I'm new at books. I have 2 Kindle singles, my Seinfeld year, and I have a new one out called 5 Minutes to Kill. I was on a Young Comedians special, and it's about what happened, some triumph, some tragedy, and, excuse me, but with this one, I had to do the permissions myself for the photos. I don't know if that's common, if authors have to do that. And it's weird stuff, like I was in the movie Dumb and Dumber, and stills I use in the book, you could use offset, like me with Jim Carrey or me with Ray Romano, but if it's from a still from the actual movie or TV show, right? You know all about this? And so I found it interesting. So then I was trying to get a still for me in Dumb and Dumber. It was like $3,000. It's crazy, because someone's job at every studio is to man these things, right? These little stills. And it could be any movie, but have you gone through that? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your book?
In my Hollywoodland book, it was the same way. I had to collect photos on the history of the Hollywoodland neighborhood. That's where the sign was built as the real estate development, just as a billboard in the neighborhood. And so most of the history photos came from a variety of sources. But there was one in particular I was able to find that the famous designer Arte lived up there, but I found it in the MGM collection at the Herrick Library, and they required it per their contract to get their permission. And we contact them and say, we're a nonprofit historic museum, it's going to be a small press run, and they wanted like $250 for the photo. So we had to say, no thank you, we can't use it. Because it became from a special source like that. So you try to find friends, the photos up to 1970.
Well, I wanted to mention from my book, Hollywood Remembered, I wanted historic photos, to some from Hollywoodland, which is now Beechwood Village, including a thing that became one of my obsessions, Lake Hollywood, originally called the Mulholland Dam. And I'm sure Mary, and not many people know that, it was covered up so people wouldn't realize how big that dam was. It was the biggest building in Los Angeles, 20 stories, taller than City Hall. So when they covered it up, I became obsessed with, I want to find photos of how it used to look. It used to be on Sunset Boulevard at the athletic, club. You could see it. And when there were earthquakes, it worried people that giant dam was up above Hollywood. So I went to the LA Library, a good place downtown, and they have massive photo archives. And they had all the photos of it being built in 1923. And then I said, well, we had a small budget. A publisher gives you a budget for your photos. How much? And they said, we'd like, $500 for each photo. And I wanted, I think, 30 photos. I said, we have maybe $300 to spend. And they said, okay, you got it. So sometimes if you're dealing with the right people, you can get a good deal.
I guess that's different than me dealing with whatever studio did Dumb and Dumber or, Wizards of Waverly Place, Disney. There's no negotiation. It's just, and even though it won't hurt them at all to let a little book use it, but I'm glad you got your
You
photos.
can't negotiate with the mouse. I think that's
Yes.
famously known.
Oh, and then some of the newer photos now, particularly like in the last 20 years now, not only do you have to get the studio's permission, sometimes the star's permission, and also the photographer's permission. So you have to have all three of those, and you're probably paying out to all three.
Oh, yes. I was, yes. And some of them in my new book about the Young Comedian special, I random photos of Rob Schneider, David Spade starting out. Who took the photo? I have no idea. You hand it to an extra. I almost thought of making someone up, But, why don't you tell us she's saying how prolific you are, your other books, how you two got together, just your little background.
Well, so my first book on Hollywoodland, it's an Arcadia book on the history of the neighborhood and the sign, was able to find from films and the history of things that people didn't know. I'm still researching. Fellow author and I have actually discovered that the sign was constructed in November 1923 from going to primary resources, finding articles in magazines and newspapers, and newsreel footage. There was newsreel footage shot when it was constructed, and I contacted the company, the University of South Carolina that has it, and the date was November 1923, late November. We found the newspaper clipping that said on December 8, 1923 was when it was illuminated. So we know it was built in November, December, and illuminated then. That required a lot of work. I did that all on behalf of Hollywood Heritage. So then we did our holiday book, and another author who has done a book approached me about doing this Hollywood at Play, and it's somewhat similar to that. It's photos of stars enjoying themselves off camera when they're not working. Annette Funicello at the beach. We've got people with their kids with their model trains. We got people playing golf or out, at Ciro's and Trocadero. So putting that together.
Sorry to interrupt. Could I ask you? That sounds fascinating.
Yes.
What are the time frames? Meaning, is it contemporary or just
it's mostly
40s?
30s through about 60s.
Fascinating.
So same way, photos that we did not have to clear. We had someone who had all the photos. So they provided us the photos and we wrote the text. But it's like a more innocent day. It's the same way with these photos. the newspapers and the studios and stars were all working together to do a positive portrayal of Hollywood and the stars. It was before the paparazzi and all the gossip things came along trying to cut everything down. So it's an innocent day. It's not like now with TMZ or all these things where they just try to go for the negative and make people look bad. So it's, a look back when Hollywood was easy and fun. But I also blog on LA history. So I do a lot on that way, both with films and on the history of buildings and things along Hollywood, and do research for authors. I'm actually working on another book as we speak. So Hollywood history fascinates me. There's a lot of stories that aren't known, or you just want to correct history, like as we did with the Hollywood sign. People will read a thing in a book and just assume it's correct. And you go back and look at primary sources and you can find out, no, it's not. So you're writing history to correct the mistakes, and hopefully people going forward will know the true story.
Could you tell us how you got fascinated, with Hollywood, the way, yeah.
Well, when I was growing up, I was about 8. My dad was a little bit older than some of the other kids' things, and I was in a small town in Texas.
I was going to ask where you're
from.
from.
And the Dallas public television station on Saturday night started showing classic films. They were not like out here where they showed them all the time. And so he wanted to watch The Red Shoes and all these other great classic films, and that got my love into classic films. And it was hard to see things, just the few channels. And then when I was in high school, they added late night, 10:30, a classic movie. So I would stay up every night at 10:30 to watch the classic movies.
What were some classic movies you remember?
Casablanca and Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House. It Happened One Night, and all these kind of great things. And so when I went to college, I studied film, was able to work.
What college? I'm sorry.
University of Texas at Austin. But I got to work with a film collection. So I worked on the Gone with the Wind documentary, a biography of David O. Selznick, books on the making of Wizard of Oz and Casablanca. So then I wanted to move out here. And so getting involved with Hollywood Heritage to help preserve history, as well as to learn about history and write about history.
That's fascinating. I mean, there's so many questions. I won't bother you. Well, as we talk, so Manny, you look like a big guy. Have you boxed anyway?
I'm tall. I don't know if I'm big. I'm Manny Pacheco. I've been a radio announcer for 35 years. Right now you can hear me on KNX. In fact, I took Sunday afternoon off to spend time in El Segundo. It's treasure time as far as I'm concerned. Thank you for having all of us here. I've worked with Mallory before. She's a treasure trove of knowledge. I was hired by a gentleman named Art LeBeau. I think we all know who Art LeBeau is. And he stands at 5'6", soaking wet, but I still lived in his shadow. And he said, you're a good radio announcer, but you need to do something different that I think will make you stand out a little bit. So I became a self-published author, and I wrote the Forgotten Hollywood book series. And basically, as opposed to Hollywood Remembered, I talk about the great character actors from Hollywood's golden age. As it stands now, I've written about 56 different character actors. These are the folks. These are the folks. I think it's your microphone because you're in front of the. 56 different character actors who basically appear below the titles of films. So everybody's going to remember Marilyn Monroe and Elizabeth Taylor and Clark Gable and Humphrey Bogart. But how many times have we seen Ward Bond or Peter Lorre or Frank Morgan or Lionel Barrymore? And you see them and you say, oh my gosh, they've been in 200 films. They are, and you're beginning to forget their names. They're literally a generation or two from being forgotten. What I didn't realize is they also tell great American stories. They're involved with the end of World War II, the assassination of John Kennedy. Hollywood history and American history intersect in what I call, metaphorically, Hollywood and Vine moments.
Whoa.
It happens even today. If you look at the Jim Comey testimony that just occurred, he referenced the movie Beckett. When the pundits talk about Donald Trump speaking to Jim Comey alone, they talk about a Godfather-esque quality. And instantly, we call to mind the movie. That's American history.
What's another one? She's a Fatal Attraction.
Exactly. Hollywood history and American history intersecting. And I didn't realize that with these great character actors, They really were involved with the end of World War II. They were involved with the assassination of Kennedy. They were surely involved with McCarthyism. And so these are great stories, and I realize there's going to be 100 books about Elizabeth Taylor, Humphrey Bogart, Marilyn Monroe.
That's why I wrote my book. Yeah, who knows who I am?
But you know, like you talked about with the basketball journeyman.
Yes.
My attitude is, how many people are going to write about Alan Hale Sr. or William Bendix?
What was that guy, Callahan Jr.? He was in the Maltese Falcon. What was his name? Callahan?
You mean Alicia Cook Jr.?
Yes.
Elisha Cook Jr.
Yes.
Yeah, he's in my next book, as a matter of fact.
What a great character actor.
You know, for a guy who died 5 minutes after he appears in every movie he made, he lived to be 96 years old. So, you know, talk about not imitating art. But the fact of the matter is, these are great actors. And just like you go to Disneyland and you go into the Pirates of the Caribbean or the Haunted Mansion, and every time you go in, you see something different. That's the reason why we return to Casablanca or Stagecoach or The Adventures of Robin Hood or Gone with the Wind. Sometimes, the first time you see, for example, Casablanca, you think, wow, is Humphrey Bogart going to get Ingrid Bergman? But the next time you see it, you might remember Paul Heinrich singing the French national anthem. The third time you watch it, you watch the evil villain, Conrad Veidt. And he's so despicable, not knowing that he actually left Germany, and in his contract, he wrote that I need to play a despicable Nazi to show how bad Hitler is. He is a hero, yes, even though he played a villain in every movie he made. And right when he hit the zenith of villainy, he dies. So he never got to see that Hitler was defeated. And then the next time you see it, you see this wonderful relationship between Humphrey Bogart and Peter Lorre. You see the goings-on with Sam and S.Z. Sakal. So every time you watch the film, you revisit it, it's a new movie. That's why we watch Hollywood movies, and that's why we return to them time and time again, and that's why I wrote my books, because I think we need to remember those.
And how and why did you become fascinated with Hollywood? How did it start?
Well, ever since I've been a child, but the fact of the matter is I'm a self-published author. I mean, my grandmother, bless her heart, she's 50 years older than me. She died when she was 90. What did I have in common with her? Practically nothing, except that we could sit and watch Mighty Joe Young, or a movie with Betty Davis and Claude Rains. And after we would watch those movies, we had something to talk about. So my parents were really big on the idea of education. That's why I went to UCLA. However, my grandmother was big on the idea of actually learning about the humanities, music, television, and movies.
Speaking of music, I was watching To Have and Have Not, and I got turned on to, again, I'm at that age where I can't think of names, but you're historians. What was his name who sang that great...
Hoagie Carmichael?
Yes! Oh, and I got fascinated with him. How did that come about? He was just like the equivalent of a Harry Connick Jr. today, and they said put him in?
I challenge every person here, the next time you watch To Have and Have Not or Casablanca or any great movie, and you listen for that soundtrack. Casablanca is prolific with great music. I mean, literally, there is over 24 great songs in that movie. But do you think about the music when you think about Casablanca?
Yes.
The next time you do, because that's your field of endeavor. But for you folks who just love great filmmaking, the next time you watch Casablanca, it will open up a whole new vista of what a great movie that is because of that fabulous soundtrack.
Hong Kong Blues. Now, how did that happen? That was like a hit, and they said, let's put Hoagie in the movie.
With Lauren Bacall singing.
Oh, God, it was... I want to say something about character actors. I got into acting because growing up as a depressed, shy, scared kid, I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew the real world wasn't for me. So then I would see character actors on TV, guys like Herb Edelman, or the late Jack Riley, who I became friends with on the Bob Newhart show. Weird people, and I go, I saw him in my Brooklyn accent, Donald Sutherland in The Dirty Dozen. I remember seeing the weird guy amongst all the macho guys. I go, I could be like a weird, skinny, weird guy in movies popping up. So that got me thinking
And you're very workable. You'll always work.
Oh, thank you.
And that's a good thing.
But actually, yes and no. The problem is, I hate to be this old guy. It's not what it used to be. It used to be character actors pop up. Now it's more like those cameos, which I used to love, are like Ben Stiller. Hey, let me give it to my friend Jack Black. I used to love the cameos. Like a guy, friends of mine, Larry Hankin, who would pop up in a John Hughes movie.
I saw him the other night.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Now it's like, it's just the cameos are, like I said, all these, like in the Ben Stiller movie, it's fun to have stars, Will Ferrell pop in, and that's why I hate that. I'd rather see a guy, who is that guy? Yeah. I used to love seeing a movie and go, who's that guy with 3 lines, like the guy in Dog Day Afternoon who chickens out? And then I used to love buying TV Guide before there was a million channels and reading all the credits. Ooh, I used to love obscure black character actors because I was happy they were working, like Thalmus Rasalusala, I don't even know, Moses Gund, you know these names?
Absolutely.
And I used to love looking through TV Guides, so...
I could interject about Hoagie Carmichael, though, not like Harry Connick, in that Hoagie was a songwriter. And very unusual in that era. He wrote words and music and performed. He was a singer-songwriter long before Carole King or Bob Dylan. And occasionally they'd put real songwriters in these movies because they could play and it was real. And when Hoagie Carmichael played, you could tell it was genuine. No one could fake that. Similar to Sunset Boulevard, you guys probably know, they put the great team of Livingston and Evans, who wrote Silver Bells. They're in my book, Songwriters on Songwriting. And they wrote a lot of great songs. They're in the party scene. There's one party scene, and they're at the piano. And they were so nervous that the director put a woman right in front of them on the piano, and that made them feel better. So occasionally, you know, it wasn't a character actor, it was a real guy who was a real musician.
No.
And back then, let me just interject that back then, the movie moguls were smart enough to hire real composers and real authors to write great stories. So you end up with stories that are written by Tennessee Williams or Arthur Miller or Jules Verne or Mark Twain.
Who wrote Marty?
Patty Chayefsky.
Yes.
And so the point I'm trying to make is that then movies were great because the stories were told so well by authentic artisans. Today, they're all really caught up with the idea of CGI.
Or young dudes from animation who do robots and cool kid stuff.
And then, too, they wanted people to look like real people. So you had the Thelma Ritters, the Everett Hortons, people that had distinctive faces but looked like the people out in the audience, whereas now everyone who's from 30 on up, we've had our eyes fixed and our mouths fixed, and we can't move our face because we can't have a line on our face. We all have to be attractive.
You know, I contend that the Old West was not saved by people who looked like John Wayne or Gary Cooper. They looked like Andy Devine, and they looked like Slim Pickens, and they looked like Walter Brennan.
Yeah.
Those are the people that won the West.
Well, that's what I'm saying back. I want to say one thing about character actors, and I'll stop interrupting. I know I'm annoying, but tell me if this is true. That like a guy like Elijah Cook Jr. Now, when they have the equivalents of those kind of like the late Philip Seymour Hoffman or Joe Pesci or Oliver Platt, now when you get heat as that, they tend to give them their own movies.
Well, J.K. Simmons is a good example.
Right. Back then, they were great fifth leading man. But now if you get some notoriety as a guy who steals a movie, give Tom Arnold his own movie. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you know, if you take a movie like It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, sure, you're going to see Jack Benny and you're going to see Jerry Lewis. But really, if you think about it, see it again and see how wonderful William Demarest plays opposite Spencer Tracy. He's fabulous in that movie. Or Don Knotts with Phil Silvers. Those scenes are priceless. Don Knotts.
You know, I wanted to mention, in terms of great authors writing Hollywood movies, to be accurate, a lot of these great authors like Fitzgerald or Faulkner would come here and were miserable. And they would write movie after movie that would get rejected. And they'd get lectured. You know how to write books, but let me tell you about the movies.
Well, they wrote plays.
Scott Fitzgerald wrote novels, but he got lectured and short stories. But his last novel, which he didn't finish because he died sadly, you know, in Hollywood after walking to Schwab's, it was called The Last Tycoon, and it was about the movie business, which was not an easy business for a lot of these guys to work in. It was tough. Well, they were great writers, but not necessarily great movie writer.
Well, yes,
so
you
that's
know,
why they
being-
spend a lot of time at Musso's drinking.
Or not writing your own books. You're your own boss. It's your story, your vision, and then like a guy like Fitzgerald would come here and there's a great book, The Disenchanted, about if you could help me, and it was based on a true thing. If you could tell, The Disenchanted,
I don't
about
know the
ice
movie.
skating,
Yeah.
an ice skating movie that he had to write.
I'll tell you one thing, the great equalizer is when they all die. And the person who can really speak well to that, you can speak well to that because of the idea of where they rest. They rest side by side, the great actors and the not so familiar actors, and they all rest side by side, and you know all about them at the Hollywood Forever, don't you?
Yeah, we have Oscar-winning filmmaker John Huston is not too far away from Z-list horror television host Vampira. So yeah, death can be quite a
And
great
you take
equalizer.
people on your tour to these places.
Yes, I've been the tour guide and house at Hollywood Forever now for the last 15 years.
And what are some funny tombstones of some stars?
Oh gosh. Joan Hackett,
Some funny tombstones.
the actress Joan Hackett, her crypt says, "Go away, I'm asleep."
What was W.C. Fields? It's better to be here than Philadelphia.
He's not at our cemetery, so I'm not
Okay.
sure. In Westwood Cemetery, Billy Wilder, it says, "I was a writer, but then nobody's perfect." Rodney Dangerfield says, "There goes the neighborhood."
Oh, wow.
So there's quite a few funny ones at the Westwood, but I'm at Hollywood Forever. So.
Wow. Anything anyone want to? Oh, well, I want to say about those books are so splendid. Those pictures is. I'd love to get posters. I love having Turn a Classic Movie on with the sound off. It's like a fish tank, an aquarium. It's so exquisite. Just, you know what I'm saying? The images, even if you're not watching it, you could tune on randomly, and there's something about that, right?
You know, back then, do you remember, now for our younger folks, you're not going to remember this, but some of our folks of a certain age, the 1960s, the fabulous 52. I was a kid wondering, what did they mean by 52? I realized there's 52 weeks in a year. Well, that makes sense now. Or the $1 Million Movie, where you would watch a movie on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, the same movie, Thursday, and by Friday, you know everything about No Time for Sergeants, Damn Yankees, The Blob. And that was fabulous. I missed that. I didn't mind watching a movie 5 days in a row if you liked the movie, if you loved the movie.
Well, I grew up in the 70s, and I fell in love with Midnight Cowboy, Joe with Peter Boyle, The Graduate, unedited with commercials, but I still loved it. You know what I'm saying? Even though it still affected me, those movies. And
Well, you know, the beauty is that the Hollywood heritage keeps those movies alive. They have lots of programs. This is one of these special programs that happens here in El Segundo, and we are blessed to be in a bedroom community like El Segundo. But if you really want to learn about Hollywood in its original pristine state, you have to visit the Hollywood Heritage, and I'm telling you, that's how I met Mary, and that was a godsend.
Yeah, the Hollywood Heritage Museum is actually where Cecil B. DeMille made his first film in 1913. It's a little barn in the Hollywood Bowl parking lot. Started out as just a barn in 1901. They bought it as a film studio in 1913. When they became Paramount in 26, they moved it to the Paramount lot. It was the gym, got moved off again, and now is where it is now. So it's the largest artifact from silent film history. And so we give programs on Hollywood history and early Paramount. We just had an event this past week on the history of the Disney backlot. We had one earlier this year on the lost Theta Bara Cleopatra film. We have all kinds of things. The authors come on their books and talk. We had one on Douglas Fairbanks, on the Marx Brothers. We screen movies. They have a Laurel and Hardy tent group that meets every other month.
I'm going to write down the website so I can how do we keep apprised of
So
these
you
events?
can go to www.hollywoodheritage.org, and we have our events listed. We have 2 movies out at the Paramount Ranch, Silence Under the Stars, this summer, where you can picnic and see a movie out at night as well.
So, and And is there a website for people to keep apprised of your tours and all that?
Cemeterytour.com is my tour website. I also, for 15 years, I publish a weekly e-newsletter that lists repertory, revival, and specialty films across Los Angeles. Because really, if you want to see classic movies on the big screen, there's no better place to be than this city, really. You've got the Old Town Music Hall, you've got the UCLA Film and TV Archive, the New Beverly, the Cine Family, which is known as the Silent Movie Theater, Hollywood Heritage, the American Cinematheque at the Egyptian,
the Hollywood
the
Cemetery,
Arrow.
right? You can
Cemetery,
actually watch it
yeah.
at the cemetery.
They're very crowded and they sell out in a nanosecond, so those are kind of harder to do, but they're fun. And yeah, it's a movable feast of film going all over the city.
Could I ask you guys a question? Speaking of Hollywood history, contemporary, they just had Feud. And what did you think of it? And some people were saying it wasn't such a big feud, that she fought with everyone. But when you say something interesting about Hollywood history, another thing we forget about is gay people. And it was fascinating, that one actor and how they're portrayed, and through history also socially, you know.
Well, as far as feud, I mean, there was really a feud, so much so, I mean, the great story that I believe is told, I didn't see, because I work on Sundays, of course I'm on KNX, so I was unable to watch it, but the one thing, and I'm old-fashioned, I don't have a smartphone, my phone is dumb, I don't have TiVo, if I miss it, I have to wait till it comes back again.
I like it like that, yeah.
But let me tell you, the one thing I know for sure is that Joan Crawford was not nominated for an Academy Award. Betty Davis was, and Joan Crawford promoted the other four actresses, and for that reason, Anne Bancroft was the winner for The Miracle Worker, among others, other than a great performance. So a real feud existed between the two. I think that picking two really celebrated actresses like Susan Sarandon and Jessica Lange. I think that was fabulous. But you know, they paid attention to the people who played Olivia de Havilland, Victor Buono,
Yeah, that was fascinating.
the director of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. They really did their homework. Mm-hmm. So all the actors had to do was really, as James Cagney or Spencer Tracy would say, get on their marks and say their lines. It was set up for them to do the right thing. And from all that I heard, the critics were very, very kind to this. And I believe now it's going to be touring, this movie's going to be touring in Britain, so now the Brits are going to have their say about it.
Wow. Is there any questions?
Yeah.
Earlier, Mary, you alluded to the paparazzi changing the cultural problem and making it more scandal-oriented. What triggered that? Was it the decline of the studio system or any particular scandal?
Well, yeah, the decline of the Hollywood system started because the studios started getting smaller and they were laying people off. The press departments weren't as big, and studio photographers. And then the magazines started popping up. There was Hush Hush, like Confidential, and that's what they were out for, was the dirt. So, and TV industry was rising, and everything started changing. You had a more innocent time, say pre-World War II, where it was mostly the more innocent stuff, and then you start getting after the war, and a lot of things happening where all of a sudden now, we don't care about the good stuff. We just want the juicy gossip. It doesn't even have to be true. Think about the Inquirer, all that. Well, people stop and buy all that, and most of it is all made up stuff. But that's when all the things come together, and we start down that path, because I don't know, the cynical thing, or think of now, we keep getting more cynical, and we want to see, we make fun of things. We don't care about the innocent stuff. So it's just starting that road down about the conglomeration of everything coming together.
Well, I wanted to mention one thing about Feud that was very accurate was when they talk about Hedda Hopper, the power of the writers in the paper. They were much more powerful than any single writer is nowadays, because there were so few. And the image of stars was protected and manipulated. When you're talking about the truth coming out, they went out of their ways when the studios were alive to protect, the people from finding the truth, to protect their stars. I mean, some of the people that are at Hollywood forever, like Barbara Lamar, back in the 20s, there was a lot going on, as you people might know. I mean, Barbara Lamar, they said she was the woman who was too beautiful and died from nervousness. I mean, what did she really die of?
I want to add, this friend of mine, Sherry Snyder, has written a huge full-length biography of Barbara Lamar that's going to be the first ever, and it's coming out later this fall. Mary and I both gotten to read it in advance. Wow. It's fantastic. So if you want a real page turner about a fascinating woman, I highly recommend this book. Barbara Lamar, The Girl Who Was Too Beautiful.
But how did she really die? I think she was anorexic.
Well, actually, it was like TB, and she had all kinds of addiction issues, and then you put the TB and things on top of it, so she died young.
That's exactly why Hollywood history gets distorted, because there were so many myths. So to write these kind of books, I was so happy when you said, we want the real story about Hollywood. Because actually the truth of what happened was as fascinating as all the myths, if not more. And when I was doing this book, I learned so much I didn't know. And one of the things that's still so striking to me, talking about Hollywood forever, is one of my favorite places in Hollywood. People talk about the lost Hollywood, like it's all gone. You go to Hollywood forever, and you're there. I mean, there's everyone. Charlie Chaplin's mother is there. Charlie Chaplin's son, Charlie Chaplin Jr. Chaplin himself is not there, but Marion Davies is there. There's this Duras. I know this because in my book I have a tour, too, and I have the tour of the cemetery, though I might have missed some important people. I do have Joe Frisco, the king of vaudeville that no one remembers. He's there, and Elmo Lincoln, the first Tarzan. But the thing that really, which I didn't know, is that Paramount, which is along Melrose, just south of the cemetery, you know, those were previously, it was Peralta and other studios. Those were all built on cemetery ground. The cemetery was there before the movies.
Yeah, but there was no...
unpopulated.
They were unpopulated. And the cemetery did not realize...
They always say that, so you don't...
No, that's true. I mean, the cemetery...
But the thing I didn't realize is that there's no wall between the... To this day, there's no wall between cemetery and the studio. It's just, there's Paramount right there. Which I still think is kind of unusual, you know? And so many people from Paramount progressed from Paramount into Hollywood forever, ultimately.
When you mentioned Hedda Hopper, which, again, I'm sorry for... being confused. Was she the one in the Bryan Cranston movie Trumbo that went after the communists?
As well. She and Luella Parsons were competing journalists.
So she ruined a lot of people's lives.
Well, and Luella Parsons as well. Luella Parsons worked for the Hearst newspapers, and Hedda Hopper was LA Times and syndicated. And they wrote columns, and so you wanted that publicity. So people would kiss up to both of them to get the stories in the paper. And if they didn't like you, yes, they would go out of their way. It was like... do the knife in. So they could make and break a lot of careers, but at the same time, if they didn't like someone, they could sort of play with the facts as well to change stuff to get at someone of things that weren't true.
You could also throw in Walter Winchell, too.
They could call you a communist. I mean, we're talking about Hollywood movies reflecting what was happening in America. Some was generally not reflected. During the Blacklist, what really happened is some of the greatest writers, actors, they weren't allowed to work because they were accused of being communists.
A little piece of funny trivia, though. Hedda Hopper's son, William Hopper, ended up playing the best friend of Perry Mason in the Perry Mason series. So Hedda Hopper is really Hollywood royalty if you think about it.
Wow.
But not all royalty is good. Sometimes there's evil royalty, too.
Any other questions? Yes.
I did have a brief question. Is it Hedda Hopper who supposedly had the affair with F. Scott Fitzgerald and Beloved Infidel?
No, Sheila Graham.
And was that portrayed in that Coen Brothers movie? Was she? What was that movie called? Barton Fink.
Barton Fink.
Was that because
Hail Caesar was the most recent. And
I gotta see that.
Swinton kind of plays dual roles as Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons.
Okay, great.
There is a film of that also.
What's that?
Sheila Graham's book was made into a film.
Which book?
Yeah.
Any
And there's
other?
many movies of Fitzgerald's, you know, like The Great Gatsby, but not really one good one. But sadly, at the end of his life, when he was working, writing Hollywood movies, The Great Gatsby was out of print, and people just considered it a relic from a bygone era. And he had no hope that it would ever come back. So he was here not happy. Had he known it would become one of the most beloved books, I think it would have meant a lot to him.
Well, there was a guy, Nathaniel West, who sadly
Day
died.
of the Locust.
Died on the same day as F. Scott Fitzgerald. They died on the same day in Hollywood.
Great Hollywood book.
If you want to know about death and sad stories, I got all those in my
Well, which is some of the best Hollywood? Like I loved What Makes Sammy Run.
I'm going to jump in because you said Nathaniel West, Day of the Locust. I think the greatest Hollywood. No, What Makes Sammy Run may be the best book about the movie industry. Day of the Locust really reflected what Hollywood was like. Nathaniel West lived right on Ivar, right off of Yucca there, you know, off of Franklin, at the Alto Nido, where his neighbors were mostly prostitutes who were his friends. He drove them often. So he wrote The Day of the Locust, which really reflected that side of Hollywood.
I just
more
read
than the
this
movies.
book by the guy who wrote What Makes Sammy Run.
Bud Schulberg.
And I didn't know there was like a hangout where all these writers would hang out. Nathaniel West.
Musso and Frank was a big hangout.
It was a
lot
bookstore, though. I
Oh,
forgot.
Larry Edmonds' bookstore was one of the things that he would get early before he started selling film-related stuff. He sold more esoteric literature, and so sometimes there was stuff. Even now, like James Joyce's. What was the one that they would be considered? You know, it had to be in brown paper because they were sort of, risque. And he would bring over. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, these writers would hang out. One guy who wrote, again, please help me. He wrote one masterpiece about World War II, and he kind of sort of committed suicide because he had anxiety. He couldn't match it. Mean Mr. Joe, or what was it called? I'm that crazy guy. Joe, I don't remember, but he drowned in a bathtub, a writer, and he was drunk, but he would so.
It's a common theme.
Yes. Any other questions?
I recently read Gene Stein's Oral Histories, West of Eden, and then saw her obituary talking about suicides, and I wondered if any of you, her life itself seemed a reflection of the stories that she wrote about. I wondered if any of you knew her, could comment on her life and observations.
No, well, I mean there was a lot of that. A lot of the people, even now in Hollywood, they come and they're either really insecure or have issues. And sometimes fame is not the thing that you want. It just exacerbates the problems that you have, or the lack of fame. And so a lot of people, either because their careers, they either self-sabotage or the careers are come to an end. And so they have a lot of issues, and there are a lot of suicides. And Hollywood can be cruel, particularly if you were a child. And you get that in between, you're a cute kid, and then you become like a teenager, is not as cute. Your career can suddenly come to an end. And there were a lot of child stars who went on because their careers ended. And very sad things of dying young.
If you want to read the best child star book I've ever come across, it's called Whatever Happened to Baby Peggy. She was pretty much the very first child superstar, one of them anyway, in the late teens. And she started making films in 1917, 1918. She's still alive today.
Wow.
And she wrote this book, and it is absolutely gut-wrenching what happened to her and why. So I couldn't put it down. I read it by a pool in Mexico in a day. Whatever happened to Baby Peggy.
And she's wonderful. We had a chance to meet her at the Cinecon festivals. I want to mention that if you want to find out more about what's going on a day-to-day basis about Hollywood's past, I do invite you to visit my Forgotten Hollywood website. I write 4 to 5 blogs a week. You'd be surprised how many things happen between the turn of the century to today that relate to Hollywood's past, and I'm happy to share those stories for free on the Forgotten Hollywood website.
And then speaking of blogs, I write for the LA Daily Mirror, and so I have things both on Hollywood stars or films, lost films, as well as in the histories of buildings. Just had one a couple of weeks ago on the Equitable building at Hollywood and Vine. Most writers say it was built as one building and opened in 1930, and no, it was built in 2 parts. One 12-story in 1928. The second one was finished in 1930, and they with L shape on one side and U, they were connected together. One author wrote that, and the others just copied that. They didn't check, and the building permits in the LA Times very clearly point that out.
I wanted to mention, I think one of the reasons Hollywood can be really tough for an actor, or other professions too, but if you're in a really famous movie and you don't make a fortune, but the movie is so famous and you're forever known as that's a tough life dynamic.
Nurse Ratched.
In my book, I have Jerry Marin, who's still with us, who is the only living Munchkin still from The Wizard of Oz. And he was a kid when he was in it. He was 18. And he said, all the Munchkins, when they were so scared of the Wicked Witch, he said, we weren't acting. That was terrifying for us. The green and the smoke. But, he was in many movies after that. We were with Marx Brothers and did, commercials. He was on Seinfeld at the end of the Yada Yada episode. But he said, people only want to talk about The Wizard of Oz. I guess it's really an important movie, huh? It's like, yeah, Jerry, he didn't realize it from the outside.
I know Norm Macdonald, and he worked on something with Josh Mostel. And Norm goes, I just want to say, I know you love my father. Now, get out of here. Like, I was told we need to wrap it up. Any last questions or statements?
I got a quick question. You really think Peter Lorre is going to be forgotten? I mean, the other names, but Peter Lorre's never going to be forgotten, is
Well,
he?
you'd like to think so. You'd like to think Claude Rains would never be forgotten. But yes, you know, you talk to our kids today.
They don't know Johnny Carson.
Yeah,
John Wayne at the TCM Festival.
You look at a 17 or a 20 or a 22 or a 25-year-old, and they'll know the face. They won't know the names. And let me tell you, I had a chance to meet Margaret O'Brien, and I got to interview her for a documentary that we're doing on Lionel Barrymore. And she says, I almost didn't do this interview because we will never be forgotten. I said, well, that's true, but your stories might. You'll always be remembered, but it's the stories that could become forgotten, and we got to make sure that never happens. And all of us as historians are working tirelessly 7 days a week, 24 hours a day to make sure that never happens.
Good. Well, this is fascinating, and I pick up your books. I mean, I love Hollywood. I can't wait to look at those pictures. So I'm sure when we sit, you won't mind if they ask you any questions they forgot or anything. And thank you so much. Thank you.